United States Secretary of State visited Africa last November, where he witnessed the decline of his country's influence in Africa. During Blinken's three-nation Africa tour, there were protests across the world against Washington's interference in Ethiopia. Here is one such protest outside the U.S. Embassy in Pretoria, South Africa.
It's an issue of the country, and we don't need America to interfere in Ethiopia's issue. Actually, we don't need any support. America must stay away. USA must stay away from the issue of Ethiopia.
Hello, I'm Mubarak Kenya, and a warm welcome to Africa Today, a weekly program that gives you an alternative view of events making headlines in Africa. Today we are focusing on the recent visit to Africa by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. This visit took place against the backdrop of declining U.S. influence in the continent and growing anti-U.S. sentiments among the people of Africa. In the second part of our program, we shall look at eNaira, Nigeria's and Africa's first digital currency. We are asking, how are the common people in Nigeria benefiting from this digital currency? And will other African countries launch similar currencies? Stay tuned for the answers and send us your comments through our social media handle as you watch.
U.S. influence declining in Africa. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited Kenya, Nigeria and Senegal last November, where he saw firsthand the decline of this country's influence in Africa. All these three countries have close and excellent economic and political ties with China. In a message that reflected an awareness of a regional power game with China, Blinken said the U.S. would no longer treat Africa a mere pawn in the global competition with other powers.
Now, speaking at a joint press conference with Blinken, Nigeria's foreign minister refuted unfounded accusations by the U.S. and Western media's hype about a so-called debt trap caused by China's proposed Belt and Road Initiative that seeks to develop new trade routes connecting China with the rest of the world.
We try to be extremely prudent in this. We don't just, borrow willy-nilly. And in fact, in reality, our debt to GDP ratio is still actually very good. So it's sustainable debt, and that we focus on, and we keep our eyes very much on that. But the reality also, is that the government realized, Mr. President realized that to industrialize, we just have to get the infrastructure in place.
Now, for more on Blinken's visit to Africa, we contacted Farah Maalim, a Kenyan politician and lawyer. He's also a former Deputy Speaker of Kenyan Parliament. Now, we first asked Mr. Maalim his opinion on some of the objectives pursued by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken during his visit to Africa, and if he actually achieved what he wanted.
My view is that he has just come to promote a partisan, partial agenda to assist the TPLF to make it easier for them to take over power. The idea was exactly the same way as what they did to Mengistu Haile Mariam last time when TPLF was taking over power, and to push them into some kind of a false sense of negotiations, which will then allow, gives them the opportunity for them to mobilize themselves, to create despondency, fear, and panic in the population, and make it easier for TPLF to take over the country.
The decline of American influence in Africa has been evident for some years, especially during Trump's presidency. Over the recent months, President Joe Biden has prompted an America is back narrative intended to signal a U.S. return to the international arena and institutions renounced by his predecessor. The decline of U.S. influence has been worsened by heightened anti-American feelings amongst Africans. These Ethiopian anti-U.S. demonstrators outside the U.S. Embassy in Pretoria, South Africa, are clearly fed up with Washington's imperialism.
America and U.S. friends, stop supporting the terrorist group, and now it's time for Africa to unite and free Africa! Free!
Will Blinken's visit lead to Washington's increased interference in Africa's internal affairs in a bid to halt its declining influence in the continent?
meddling in Africa for the Americans has been the order of the day. And they're doing it not for the interest of Africans, but they're doing it for their own interest. And their own interest basically dictates for them to lay their hands on the resources of Africa. When a country becomes a failed state like DRC Congo, it's easier for them to pull out of that country every day $500 million worth of minerals and natural resources, and nobody's going to question them because there's no government, there's no viable government to make them accountable for their actions. So, and that's how they want it. They do it in Somalia today. The planes that leave Mogadishu airport every night at 3 o'clock, not a single Somali, not a minister, not a president, not the head of the security intelligence there. Nobody knows what they're taking out of that place. They did that with Balidogle, where there was next to it were mountains. Everybody knows they were moving the uranium out of that place. They are doing a lot of work in Somalia, taking things that nobody knows what it is. So basically, they want these countries to be failed states so that it's easier for them to start moving and transporting and cutting away the gold, the uranium, the coltan, the manganese, the everything, the gas in the final analysis, because the Horn of Africa is endowed with the biggest deposits of natural resources in the world.
Africa has witnessed tremendous transformation over the past decade as most countries in the continent have adopted a look-east policy after failing to develop, especially in terms of infrastructure, despite close ties with Western powers. Mr. Maalim gives us here his take on why the United States is witnessing a rapid decline of its power and influence in Africa.
Then, of course, the other countries that are coming up now, the Chinese have come up massively. The Russians are beginning to have certain influences also in Africa. I just hope they are also smart enough to avoid some of the pitfalls of their the Americans there. And after all, they have to be very careful because the other races will not see such a big racial difference between the Russians and the Americans. Of course, there's a history, a powerful history, which is very different. I mean, this was an egalitarian society which was embedded or basically founded on socialist ideals. They just have to be very careful the countries where they go into. I'm talking about the Russians. But the Russians are coming up, and many countries in Africa are willing to welcome the Russians. The Turks are making an impression and a big difference in Africa right now. And they're increasing what we call their influence in Africa. And I have a feeling that it's going to be much more phenomenal and bigger than it is today. So America has lost. The West has lost.
At the last stop of his three-nation trip to Africa, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken claimed that there will be a fresh investment in Senegal without saddling countries with unimaginable debts. While Blinken did not directly accuse China, U.S. media said his debt talk is clearly aimed at the China proposed Belt and Road Initiative. This is while African intellectuals have rejected the U.S. accusation on China's engagement with Africa.
But China's investment, I wouldn't consider it as a debt trap because China has the kind of negotiating position where it would like, number one, to look into the success of the BRI because many of these projects are part and parcel of the BRI.
The multiple effect is that it is creating a value chain. You're having distributors, you're having other key players, apart from direct jobs. For the first time in the history of Africa, we have a partner that is both willing and able. So what is needed is for us to meet the Chinese at the middle, and both of us can walk the long walk of getting Africa, fulfill its manifest destiny.
Mr. Maalim talked about the rise of China in Africa. So we asked him to elaborate on the reason why many African countries prefer having trade and infrastructure projects with China as opposed to the United States.
Any negotiation, economic negotiations between America, Europe, and third world countries is one that is only a continuation of colonization and basically to use both the human and the natural resources of those countries to their advantage for eternity. And that cannot be allowed. Those things have got to stop. Now, Africa is going to develop with the people who are willing to invest their money in, but on equal and respectable terms, like the Chinese and in some cases the Turks and other countries, like the Indians, if they're willing also to do the same. The Russians, I expected them to do much better than they're doing now. But you can rest assured, we are through as a continent with Western imperialism. We're through with that. We don't want any more of it. And the more you get out of it, like Magufuli did before his life came to an end, he had such a short period of time, but he did so much for that country that everybody wants to do the same now.
Now, while in Senegal, Blinken warned a Russian military company to stop its involvement in Mali. Now, these arrogant remarks came while Mali officially invited the Russian security company to assist in combating Takfiri terrorists.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said the company has a legitimate right to be in Mali because it was invited by the transitional government. Speaking during a meeting with Lavrov in Moscow mid-November, Mali's Foreign Minister Abdoulaye Diop said Russia has always been with this country in difficult times.
Whenever Mali has been in difficult situations since our independence, Russia has always been with us. Today we are in a difficult situation and we're still turning to this friend so that they can help us out.
Where does the US get the audacity to order around African countries on their internal affairs and relations with other world powers?
They got their way around with Africa the way they wanted it. God knows for how many decades. And how many decades before that as the colonies of the Western countries. How many decades before that as a source of slaves for their own economies in Europe and in all the Americas. And later on, neo-colonialism, as we have been experiencing for the last 70 years. So basically, you become so audacious, you talk carelessly, as if you're so what you call absorbed in your own perception of the power you have that you think you can order everybody around. It's absolute nonsense, and because the French are taking away the Mali gold. And if they can bring in the Russians to get rid of these French, because the French have been creating a revolution or a coup in every West African country.
Now, despite claims of support for the advancement of democracy, the United States and indeed other Western powers continue to support totalitarian regimes in Africa and elsewhere as long as they serve their imperialist and domineering interests. Now, many Africans are now questioning if Westerners really mean what they say about democracy. Mr. Malim gives his take.
So they don't care. They don't care for democracy. They don't care for human rights. They are, deep down, terrible racists who believe that we're no more than better than what they call the animals in the jungle up there. So this is the reality of life. And America, which is supposed to be the biggest democracy right now, and the black man is every day fighting for equality. And then you tell me that that's the country to emulate? That's the country to come to us here and tell us how we should live? No. We lost we stopped, keeping our eyes on the prize. At the time of independence of the struggle, we should have ended the relationship with those countries way back.
Very well put there. How can Washington lecture Africans on democracy and human rights while African Americans face oppression and institutional racism across the U.S.? Thanks for that, Mr. Maalim, a former Deputy Speaker of Kenya's National Assembly. Let's now take a short break, and when we come back, we shall look at Nigeria's first digital currency. So stay with us.
eNaira, Nigeria's first digital currency.
Last October, Nigeria became the first African country to introduce a digital currency. During the launch of the currency, Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari noted that Nigeria is also one of the earliest countries in the world to introduce a digital currency to its citizens. He said digital currencies could foster economic growth.
And its sister agencies, like the Nigerian Communications Commission, integration of banking softwares across the country, and painstaking tests to ensure the robustness, safety, and scalability of the central bank digital currencies system.
Well, Godwin Omfiele, governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, says the eNaira is the digital equivalent of the physical naira, the country's currency. Many Nigerians have generally welcomed the new digital currency, but say there is need to further educate the public on its use. Let's take a listen.
I think it's a very good policy, but the thing from the feelings we are getting, many people don't know much about it. So there is still room to engage people, to get to know, so that they will participate actively.
Well, for more on the eNaira launch, we contacted Amin Yusuf, the co-founder of Afrobytes, an international tech marketplace that connects African tech industry with the media, business and technology leaders, policy experts and investors. Now, we first asked Mr. Yusuf to tell us how the eNaira digital currency is doing since its launch.
Actually, how to say that? The launch was just 1 month ago, last month, so it's pretty new to draw conclusions about this e-currency. But what we can see from now is that it's quite stable because it's between 0.0021 and 0.0022 euros. So the parity is quite good. It's quite stable.
While there are millions of young people in Nigeria who are techno-savvy or digital natives, a huge segment of the country's population needs to be trained on how to make use of the eNaira and e-transactions. A Nigerian reacting to the launch of the digital currency says there is need for inclusivity.
And again, so that we're not creating a product for very few people in the society. We're creating a product that will run across because we have quite a number of people at the bottom of the pyramid who needs to be included.
Will eNaira benefit the ordinary Nigerians, especially small-scale business owners?
First, we have to remember that the eNaira is just a digital form of the naira. So if the naira is not stable, the eNaira won't be stable. And there is a question of the confidence. Do people have more trust in naira than in eNaira, or the contrary? The fact is that those two currencies are the same. So there is a question of trust for the adoption. For sure, it's more practical, it's digital, there is a lot of benefits that are like just electronic. But to get access to the use of that, you have to have an eNaira wallet, you have to do a KYC, you have to do a long process before being able to use it.
Speaking during the launch of the Central Bank of Nigeria digital currency, otherwise known as eNaira, and its underlying technology called blockchain, President Buhari was upbeat that it would increase Nigeria's GDP.
Alongside digital innovations, central bank digital currencies can foster economic growth through better economic activities. Indeed, some estimates indicate that the adoption of central bank digital currencies and its underlying technology, called blockchain, can increase Nigeria's GDP by 29 billion United States dollars over the next 10 years.
We asked Mr. Yusuf his opinion on the eNaira's contribution to Nigeria's economic growth in the long term.
There is an estimation of $29 billion contribution to the GDP. That's the numbers. But it's just 1 month, so it's kind of hard to draw conclusions. The only thing we can say for sure is that eNaira is less costly, it's more efficient. They want to make it generally acceptable, safe, and trusted as a means of payment. But that's, as I said previously, that's just Naira. So what is important here is to understand that it provides the stability of Naira. No more, no less.
There was apprehension across Nigeria after the American tech giant Google briefly removed the eNaira from Play Store after over 100,000 users had downloaded it. Now, this has raised concerns about the vulnerability of African countries that rely on foreign platforms for critical ICT needs.
Professor Elijah Bitange Ndemo, a Kenyan ICT champion and academician, gives here his opinion on what Africa needs to do to avoid pitfalls inherent in over-reliance on Western tech giants.
Now, tell me, I am not being bad to say a country like Botswana, 1 million. What would it tell Americans that we don't want Google here because they would say to hell with you. But if AU stood up and said we don't want this 1.2 billion people, they would listen to you. They would listen to you. So we need to create a mega single market to have leverage in terms of discussions. Otherwise, now we are just slaves like we were when we were colonized first.
The eNaira app extensively relies on foreign platforms, including Google's Play Store, which pulled down this app. So what needs to be done to stop reliance on foreign IT platforms?
The only solution to stop relying on a foreign IT platform would be to create our own. But the problem is the penetration after the adoption. Basically, that's the same problem for so many countries around the globe. Whether you are in France or Italy or Nigeria, that's the same. You have to deal with Google, Facebook, Microsoft, sometimes some Asian companies. So there is a problem of independence here, but that's not specific to Nigeria. That's globally that we have this problem.
In Africa, nations from Ghana to South Africa are testing digital forms of their legal tender to allow for faster and cheaper money transactions without losing control over their monetary systems.
So what is the future of eNaira, and will other African countries launch similar digital currencies in future?
What is interesting with the eNaira is that first it's an innovation. We have to remind that it is an innovation, and it will respond to a lot of questions. First, do countries able to propose an alternative to the cryptocurrency model? Because, as I said, this is an e-currency. That's not cryptocurrency. That's very different. We know who is the owner of the eNaira. You don't know exactly who is the owner of, a digital currency. There is no. It's not anonymous. First, so the question is basically, do the general public believe in the currency of a country, whatever its form is, whether it's physical or digital? So what is interesting at the same time is that it's an innovation. I think there is a curve here of learning. Probably Nigeria authority will have to adapt along the way. They will get experience. So that's still interesting. And I think that even if we can't say what will happen in 1 year or 2 years or 10 years from now, it's an interesting move, for sure.
Mr. Yusuf there says that the eNaira is a great innovation, but we still have to wait and see how it turns out in the coming months and years. Well, that brings us to the end of this week's edition of Africa Today. We do welcome your comments through our social media handle, so keep them coming. You can also watch this episode and all our previous shows on our website, presstv.ir. It was great having you, and thanks a lot for watching. Goodbye for now, and God bless you.